Hi, everyone. Welcome to another conversation with the Philosophical Muser. I'm James Knight, the blogger at Philosophical Muser, and there is a link to the blog below if you'd like to take a look. As well as writing blogs, I like to invite guests on to talk about topics that are hopefully interesting and relevant. And tonight we are going to talk about the kind of society that's being created, really, by what commonly been known as wokeism, where we've been plagued by various impediments to free speech. We seem to have fallen foul of what's known as cancel culture. We have this thing that we call offence culture now, and a kind of post-truth gradual erosion of critical thinking. It seems to be making many people, especially young people, it seems, significantly ill-equipped and unprepared to tackle life in all its complexities and its character-building challenges. So, a lot to unpack, and I am delighted to be joined by my guests, Paula Wright and Dan Liddicott, to see if we can explore this a bit more deeply. Paula and Dan are both very talented friends of mine whose own material I've enjoyed online. So I hope we can attempt to generate quite a bit of light on these matters, given the heavy artillery of the guests alongside me. So welcome, Paula and Dan. Thank you so much for taking part. I'll hand it over to you to introduce yourselves.
Who's first?
You can go first, Paula.
All right. Okay. So I'm a writer. I've got a Substack called Sexy Isn't Sexist, which is based on one of my articles and a stand-up routine. And I've been studying evolutionary psychology for about 15 years now, and I'm studying a Masters of Science at Brunel there. So yeah, all of my kind of writing and I guess philosophy is based on a kind of realist profile of human nature, like that. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. And Dan?
Well, that's an impressive resume. I'm not sure I can live up to that, but as you know, my name's Dan Liddicott. I'm a former educator. 10 years ago, I was a college lecturer teaching at FE and HE level. Since then, I've been in business, and I've also been much more involved politically. So I joined the Libertarian Party a number of years ago, became a candidate a couple of times. I even served as their party chairman at one point. But I've kind of moved on from party politics now, and I intend in future to stand as an independent libertarian, because I think that's more consistent with my libertarian ideals.
Thank you. Yeah, and I think all of those qualities you guys have shared, they're all going to be relevant tonight in unpacking some of the things we're going to be talking about. I've been observing what's happening over the last few years, and this is the first time I've really put it together, I think, to try and have a really in-depth conversation about it. To me, despite significant progression in society in a number of ways, I'm sure we all know what they are, in terms of economic growth and living standards and technology and all of the different ways that we're getting better as a species materially. I think society seems to me to be getting just madder and madder in some of the crazy things that are happening. And at a surface level, it seems to me to be a combination of what's been espoused by the media and politicians, what's taught in our schools, what's becoming enshrined in law, and this kind of reservoir of social contagion that's flooding our society is probably exacerbated by the fact that there's so much information available, which of course is great that we've got the entirety of the world's knowledge to hand, the touch of a button on the internet. And I think all of those things I just mentioned are all connected. Everything feeds off each other, doesn't it? But we've never been given so much access to so much information so quickly. And I wonder if so many people in society are struggling to handle that much information and all of the things that they're being asked to consider, and the ways in which they're outsourcing their thinking to people online. And anyone now is an opinion maker, a blogger. People seem to have given themselves almost parity with any author in terms of what they're able to say, and of course that ties into the qualities of free speech that we all espouse. So what do you guys think? Help me unpack this. Paula, what do you think? That's a fair summary? And let's try and dig a bit deeper into some of those things. So, with the woke and the cancel culture and stuff. And what do you think is happening?
Well, it was a lot of questions.
Yeah.
I actually don't think we're seeing any kind of change psychologically in the human species. We just kind of have more access to other people, to seeing what's going on. And I think what we've experienced more kind of profoundly isn't that there's a lack of critical thinking. I don't think, depending on what you want to define critical thinking as, it's only really particularly necessary if you want to write if you want to be a writer really of, formal logic or anything like that, or politics, economics and stuff like that. Generally in the human population, I mean, this is a kind of theme in evolutionary psychology, what you call ecological rationality, which doesn't denigrate the emotions at all. It kind of names the emotions as a kind of superordinate program that, as Hume said, was it Hume who said, that the passion is a slave, or the rationality is a slave to the passions,
Slave to the passions,
that's, yeah. So that's how we're all emotional creatures, and if it wasn't adaptive in some way, it wouldn't have reached fixation in the species at all. What we've seen, and also, throughout the ages, the kind of development of, like I was just saying before, I've read Scruton's Conservatism, and about the kind of things that happen to lead up to kind of conservatism developing as an ideology, and libertarianism, and the Whigs and liberalism, and what kind of differentiates all of them. There's always been social contagion and mass delusions forever. But going back to what I was going to say, what I think is different now is that one particular ideology, which is kind of a feminism, has made privacy. Well, one of the main slogans of feminism was the private is political, or the political, and whereas in the past, it used to be kind of like you used to kind of leave people's political persuasions just out of the conversation, and you wouldn't tell anybody. You wouldn't be asked who you'd voted for. It was seen as kind of impolite and bad form. Now everything is all this kind of the private, ethical. You have to kind of spill your guts, or your kind of brain out for everybody to see, because if you don't, then there's that maximum. If you're not with us, you're against us, and that is, I think, or might be, a manifestation of kind of the feminization of society, certainly. So I'm saying I don't think things have changed particularly very much in human nature, but I think what's culturally deemed, preferable or acceptable has changed, and that is bringing out different traits that have been latent within, that have always been there. Yeah, does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Okay.
I think that because of the great connectivity as well, it's so easy to politicize almost everything. I mean, I've seen the state grow beyond belief in just my adult lifetime, and that there's a term in economics, Wagner's law, which says that the the greater a society increases its economic growth, the more likely it is that the state will fatten itself up on the fruits of that labor. Dan, what do you think? Any thoughts on the causes and
both share some really fascinating insights there. I hadn't thought about the feminist connection at all until Paula brought it up, because I'm not allowed to see that women are in some way in a collectivist thinking sort of way, and therefore not all women, because I'm a libertarian, I don't believe in collectivism. But I'm not allowed to observe these group movements that might suggest that there's something about the feminist movement that's doing something wrong. But the thoughts I was having about your comments, James, about the idea that it's getting too complex and we're outsourcing our thinking, like Paula was saying, I don't know. It reminded me of a book by Edward Bernays from something like 1920 that he wrote called Propaganda, and it is a fascinating book. And surely by now it's out of copyright because it's so old, but here's just a little snippet from it that kind of makes the point. It says, in theory, every citizen makes up his mind on public questions and matters of private conduct. In practice, if all men had to study for themselves the abstruse economic, political, and ethical data involved in every question, they would find it impossible to come to a conclusion about anything. And so he goes on to make the point that we've all voluntarily agreed to let an invisible government the data, high spot the outstanding issues, and hand it over to us in a way that we just read. And he's kind of got a point. There is so much going on, and I've got so much data available. Most people, the man on the Clapham omnibus, be able to do that because they wouldn't know how to triangulate it and to assess what's true and what's false. Just take the COVID recent experience and how widely the opinions differed on all of that, and who do you believe? And so people tend to pick a side rather than think critically, and then sort of it's almost like they pick their priests who they're going to believe. Do you know what I mean? The people who will be intermediaries between them and the truth. And, so you get people frowning on those who read the Daily Mail for their news. You must read the Guardian or something left-wing, and then it's true. But if it's Daily Mail or the Times, it's false. Do you know what I mean?
Well, so politics has kind of turned into a kind of reality. What do you call them? Reality, like the singing shows and stuff like that. It's like, oh, who do you like best? And it's kind of, and you remember, well, one of my first blog was called Woman on the Clapham Omnibus, and but now I don't know where you live now, but now we have a free newspaper. I don't know who edits it or funds it, but it's free on every bit of public transport on the Clapham Omnibus. And it's really kind of divisive and liberal and woke, and it's if you get on the Clapham Omnibus, you get on the tube, you get on the bus, you get on everything. You've got the Metro, and it's called, the newspaper's called the Metro, and so you're not even safe in the Clapham Omnibus to just kind of think for yourself. You kind of just imbibing all of this kind of tribalism on your way to work, where you just kind of like your kind of libertarian leanings will just kind of say, oh well, people just kind of want to be left alone, and thinking of an entertainment. Most of them, and perhaps people who take it seriously, the people who make livings from it, are making a bit too much of it, because most people don't, probably take it too seriously, unless their job is connected with it, or unless it comes into their house, which at the minute it is, as children are being taught certain things, and people have to put their pronouns on at work. It's not just kind of like, well, that's okay, but as long as it doesn't bother me, it's actually bothering everybody now, and it's
great point.
It's getting annoying.
And I say, you said, unless it affects work, but of course it does work, because especially the larger corporation, the more likely you are to have some kind of training that you have to do every year that
based on
initiates you into woke
Mm.
ideology, and all of those things. I mean, I have a friend who recently did some kind of training for driving as part of their job. What was climate change, as if that affected what kind of driver you were going to be. And so it just sort of creeps in. You know, I'm imagining, you know, let's just be fanciful here, that there's sort of groups, little sort of committees of people whose job it is to lever the ideology into as many places as possible. So it's impossible to escape.
No, there are organizations like that, and their remit is mission creep, to actually shoehorn intersectionality into every crack and you know, wrinkle of everything that you work for. So, so there are actual companies that's their job.
I'm imagining it, but it's actually true.
It's true, yeah, definitely.
Yeah, and this goes back to what we said earlier about the education system and how it all. I'm not that surprised that these big subjects aren't really mastered by the majority of people, because, you know, it takes a long time to get very competent at any subject. And I think the saddest thing you see really in politics is the level of critical inquiry and the level of the narrative that is so anemic to cost benefit analyses and to any kind of critical evaluation that gives the subject its due gravitas is just absent. And I think that's largely because the electorate don't really demand it, because, you know, who's got time to you know, be very competent at that number of subjects that are required to have a proper understanding of things that are politicized, and because of which the politicians are of such low caliber. And I think one of the good things about the internet is, you know, you recall in the past when you had discussions on TV, and they were always they were in segments on a schedule, very tightly managed, and now we have the ability to have long discussions on the internet. Doesn't really matter how long it takes. If the conversation is fruitful, we'll just carry on, and that's what's happening, you know, nowadays. And I think
Sorry, I interrupted.
No, the thing is, I'm not sure a lot of these people really. I tend to look at actions more than words, and people are saying a lot, but I tend to be quite skeptical of what they actually genuinely believe, as opposed to what they say they believe. I mean, when it comes to, say, feminism as a good example, I think largely it's a fairly toxic belief system. I think it has a fairly tainted history, and I think I can't think of very much, if anything, whereby egalitarianism isn't superior to what the feminists are trying to espouse. I mean, it must be quite confusing being a feminist. You know, you have to simultaneously believe that women are subjugated by men, as well as being equal to men, superior to men, and that there's no difference between men and women. It must be quite a confusing thing. But when I see feminists arguing, they never go for where they really could go if they took their feminism to the logical end. I mean, you never hear, for example, a feminist bothered at all about Islam, which is one of the most oppressive things to women in this country. You know, if they really cared about things that were oppressive to women, I know I'm generalizing a bit, but from the experiences of feminists that I've had, you know, why aren't they talking about Islam's attitude to women and the subjugation of the sexes there? It's
because you're making a rookie mistake, James.
Am I? What is it, Paula?
Yeah, feminism isn't about women's rights or even about women. It's about dismantling patriarchy.
Oh, of course, yes.
There's no you know, mystery about that. It's been written through the ages. It only kind of uses the kind of woman trope, the weak woman trope, when it's in trouble, or when it kind of wants to seem more or less radical or militant than it is. It's so it kind of definitely, feminism itself views women as inferior and then uses that trope to kind of piggyback, or rather like a Trojan horse. It's kind of, oh, we care about women, blah, 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 like let us in and we'll take the power. That's why feminists are obsessed with power, to the point more than anybody else in the world, more than Henry Kissinger. It's just
That's
feminists. It's nuts. They've written books and books and libraries written about power and power. It's just like nobody cares about power unless you want to have power that much, and that's what feminism is. And so the confusion is like, who do they want power for? Well, we know that
it's not women.
It's not women, no, because
women.
female intersexual competition kind of completely blows feminism and the sisterhood apart in that kind of sense. So it's just it's a clan, it's a clade, it's a of totalitarians, be they men or women, that are using kind of the trope of weakness. And what did I was reading? I read Thus Spake Zarathustra recently, and in his chapter The Tarantulas, he kind of completely describes feminism and woke and social justice culture in that chapter. I recommend people go and read that chapter of The Tarantulas, because that's who they are. They're not feminists, they're not social justice warriors, they're tarantulas. Basically.
I think you hit the nail on the head when you called it a Trojan horse, because and it's not the only one. It's part of the Marxist revolution that's trying to dismantle the four olds, exactly as they were in the Peking campus, back in the 60s. Undermine all the things that made the West as powerful and enduring being, and it's just a continuation of that, which is why the family, it's an attack on traditional values, old customs, old habits, and old ideas. That's the four olds, and this is just one of them. And the film is the vehicle for attacking.
And what seems like a kind of war between intersectional gender feminism and radical feminism. Those two kind of seemingly agree on handling the patriarchy. The lesbian feminists just want a right to identify as feminists, as lesbians, sorry. They want to be able to say, I am a woman, I'm attracted to women, I don't, they don't want to kind of that collapse, that kind of, but they were the ones, in the 70s and 60s and 70s that led, post-structural, postmodern gender French feminism into the whole kind of place. And I write it in one of my articles on Substack, the cure for feminism isn't feminism, because feminism is the problem. It started fires, and now radical feminists are coming along, kind of like putting out these fires like big white knights, and it's like, hang on, you're the arsonist. Get lost.
That's right.
I remember having a debate with a feminist a while ago about the so-called gender pay gap. It was about the time that I thought there was this awful video, I think it was in Australia, of a restaurant or cafe charging a man tax, utterly ludicrous. And I remember discussing this whole notion of
what kind of beta male is it?
This lady was convinced that
the kind that likes really bad blowjobs, I think it is.
she was utterly convinced that women are
self-loathing blowjobs.
And she couldn't understand that getting an average is a terrible way to make a statistical measurement to look for unfair discrimination. Of course, we all know why the so-called gender pay gap is as it is. It's nothing to do with, or almost nothing to do with unfairness. I mean, everyone knows or most people
in the West
why But it became obvious that you just
even
couldn't convince her. You know, there was no
more-
way of convincing her.
Isn't it true that where there is more equality, the difference in career choice is even more sort of polarized?
Yeah, that was found in the Scandinavia.
That's right.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Scandinavia. Yeah.
So where women are actually free to make the choices they would rather choose according to their temperament and preferences.
So that's so that's choice feminism, something that radical feminists and intersectional feminists are vehemently opposed to, which is really odd, because I find a kind of analog in choice feminism to female choice in evolutionary theory, you know, which is kind of what's best for that individual, because we're all individuals. We're not, we have kin, but in the wider world, we're not related to each other to any degree that we're going to actually, you know, we're going to try and help our close relatives more than that, which includes our families and our partners and uncles, cousins, all of these kinds of things, different degrees. And female choice, basic feminism is anti-female choice, which is an evolutionary mechanism of female empowerment. Yeah, but do you remember years ago when everything was, we had such choice, and it's kind of like, and everything was really cheap, and it was just kind of baffling. It was just, too much choice. You go in the supermarket, too much choice. And now we have no choice. I wonder if it was kind of like a psyop to just get us sick of choice, where we just thought, please make it simple, just make it more simple. And now, you know, well,
you see, I don't mind a simple life. A simple life's great.
No.
The problem is that it's who chooses which simple life we all have to live.
Yeah.
And so choice should be about the individual, you know, moving in the direction in life that they wish to go. It doesn't, but so the choice there isn't, instead of being bombarded with choice, so we feel like we've got too many choices. Maybe it comes back to the idea that James had right at the beginning, where we're outsourcing our thinking. And so rather than acting on our own motivations, we keep responding to the pressure to react and act on other people's motivations.
Yeah. I guess that's a consequence of being plugged into social media all of the time. But I mean, people are plugged in different pockets and bubbles of social media, like teenagers are plugged into TikTok and Instagram and about, you know, beauty influencers and things like that, rather than political kind of stuff. Or I don't know, my son's gay, and you know, he kind of looks at there's a community for everybody. There's a bubble for everybody, and I guess it's if you don't take time out from that, or you don't realize that it's a bubble, and you don't realize that you actually live in a real world with real people, and actually what's happening on Twitter or TikTok doesn't make any difference. It doesn't change your life one iota. If you stopped looking at it, nothing would change. In fact, your relationships would probably improve. I think
that's a good point as well about
that's
the distinction between individualism, the fact that we're all unique, and the fact that creeping into society is this notion of identity politics, and that the individual who speaks within a particular group is thought by so many to be speaking on behalf of that entire group, when of course if you break it down, you know, it's a very diverse group of individuals. And you know, I think to me, everyone who's ever thought about this is probably likely to be on the side of equality of opportunity. We know it's a desirable aspiration. We know that pushing artificially for equality of outcome is usually a bad idea, and equality of opportunity is great for all the reasons really that artificial equality of outcomes not. You know, the two are in tension in a sense. They're not very often complementary. I think equality of opportunity is good because we want everyone to have the best chance to fulfill their potential, with the fewest impediments, and by having healthy equality of opportunity, we find out actually how unequal people are, in IQ and talent and ability and knowledge and ethics, whatever it might be, and all the physical characteristics, of course. It's only by giving people the same tests and under the same conditions that we find out who is best. And I think that's, if we ensure we have equality of opportunity,
and best of, yeah, I think that's a great point. I mean, I've got no problem with identity politics, except that it was Ayn Rand who pointed out that the smallest minority is the individual. And so if identity politics could be about recognizing the uniqueness of each individual instead of creating these artificial fortresses to pack people in and tell them how they're supposed to think about the people in the other fortresses, then a lot of our problems would be solved. But it's not really identity politics. It's fake identity politics. Yeah. It's label politics.
Yeah, because equality and diversity are incompatible. It just can't happen.
No.
But I think in the abstract, people believe that equality about opportunity is good. But then you kind of get into your in group and your kin group and your friendship group and your community group, and people are going to start. It's not an abstract concept anymore. They want their friends. They have reciprocal relationships with those people. There's kind of like you do a favor for somebody. You might not even like them very much, but that they're going to do you a favor. So it's a difficult thing to kind of balance the abstract and the action concept. Again, needs a really kind of you need to understand human nature and kind of the proximate.
I understand what you're saying, but maybe we can in real life really make it less abstract. I mean, you were talking about if we get off social media, our relationships would improve, and that would be with our own family and our neighbours and our local communities. And then it isn't a stranger who maybe you would be willing to shout at on Facebook, but in person listen to with empathy, and everything suddenly changes. So if we can stop it being so abstract, and the onlineness of everything makes it abstract, more abstract than it ought to be or needs to be.
Yeah, because I mean, it creates communities that aren't connected by any kind of selection pressure at all. So it makes it ideal for ideologues. Yeah, but I hate that term empathy. I really hate it. I wish we could just talk about compassion and understanding again, because
I've been reading too much Brené Brown. Forgive me.
But I mean, it's a kind of buzzword, and we're still, consciousness and individual perception is still a frontier in, psychological science and stuff. So to kind of say that empathy is kind of settled science is we cannot understand, what's going on in somebody else's head as they experience. We have a heuristic, which is compassionate. It's kind of like, oh, a lion's coming for us. We must all be really scared. But at the same time, there might be a psychopath who's really excited by it in the crowd, or there might be, somebody else who's going, actually, I'm going to remember this, because if this is where this, at the hunter, or people are going to have really different just very well, this is the variation kind of thing about, or the mutations, whether they're good or bad. Compassion is a much more kind of broader heuristic to understand. It's kind of, well, you have autism. I empathize. You can't empathize with somebody with autism. You can't empathize with somebody with ADHD. You can't empathize with somebody who's been experienced PTSD in Iraq or anything like that. You can only have compassion and understanding and patience with them. So this idea of empathy that's flooding through the psychology community is really repulsive to me, actually. It's like, you can't empathize. Stop it.
No, I think the word is
it's just a T in sympathy. It's just I'm an empath.
Yeah, it's been transposed to mean the attempt to understand one another, hasn't it? It kind of works at a low resolution level, but yeah, it's practical empathy.
Well, they were trying to balance sympathy and empathy, weren't they? As two different things. And to be honest, I never really got my head around what's the difference. I'd love one of you to tell me.
Well, Paul Bloom wrote a book called Against Empathy a few years ago. So I think he describes it in there. But I mean, empathy is I'm not going to pretend that I'm going to give a clinical kind of.
What they tend to say is
mm-hmm.
at a very rudimentary level, that they would say that sympathy is something that is perceived that you haven't experienced yourself, but you are trying to understand it from the perspective of the other person. And empathy is more than just, well, I'm sympathetic, but I can actually get inside the kind of mindset that you might be in. So, for example, if someone's
it's mind reading.
Yeah, it is in a sense. It's I've not been a victim of sexual abuse, so I can sympathize with someone who. I don't mean me personally. I mean, one can sympathize and say that must have been awful, but a fellow victim might think, well, I can have empathy because we both know what that feels like. But of course, as Paula said, it's way more complex than that, and we're only guessing from our first person perspective and making
and I think that's another kind of facet of the kind of feminization of culture, where kind of like female relationships are much more kind of closely intense like that. It's kind of but often the kind of the stuff that girls learn and the secrets they tell each other, and the risk that they is often very weaponized, if that relationship turns sour, which is what we see in cancel culture as well.
Yeah, I just want to make a comment, a technical comment. I don't know if it's just me, but just for the viewers as well. Are you experiencing any breakup in signal? Because I am a bit, and I just want to let the viewers know really that hopefully it's running smoothly as a YouTube vid, but there's a bit of interruption in signal at my end. Are you guys experiencing that too?
Occasionally,
yeah, but it's not major.
Okay, so let's talk about what I think is possibly a danger at the minute that's getting worse and worse, I think, which is the silent majority. What I mean by that in this context is, it seems to me, and I'm always very mindful of some of the ramifications of fully saying everything that I want to say, because we're so many simultaneous things at once, aren't we? Particularly if we're employed by people who might take a different view of it. But it seems to me that there are a lot of things being said that, and it sort of taps into what you were saying earlier, Paula, about the whole being offended and possibly on people's behalf, that are a lot of people now quite reluctant to say what they really feel about things, particularly with things like, say, the gender debate. And thereby it's assumed that because so many people are just going along with it, that this is the mainstream view and this is where we need to be going. It seems to me that could be happening. I have this vision in my head of the famous boiling frog metaphor, which obviously wouldn't, people often use this. It obviously wouldn't, be accurate in a scientific sense. The frog would just try to get out of the saucepan as it felt uncomfortable. But if we continue that metaphor for illustrative purposes, it seems to me that we've got a very large pot of slowly boiling frogs, and where many of them are quite willing to accept their fate and stay put and boil to death. It seems there are many others who are desperately wanting to encourage everyone to get out quickly, but who've been too easily silenced into not making a fuss about the water's increasing temperature, you know, and because of the radical sort of Overton window shift, it's not become the case that those frogs who insist on jumping out of the pot are likely to be accused of being intolerant and not up to speed with the sort of prevailing narrative. So do you think that's happening? Do you agree with me on that it's a real danger, the silence?
I'm just imagining these frogs jumping out, and the ones that are still in the water that's slowly bubbling, bigot, you know, as they die out. Well, they die.
No, I think that's definitely true, but I think there's a difference in, I mean, what you say, what, you know, when it comes to polling day, what people will vote for about what, you said you watched my stand-up, and at the time, it was pre-COVID, and one of my friends who live in London. I've got two friends who live in London, and they're really good friends. But one of them voted Brexit, but didn't tell anybody. So I was at the time, because I was thinking about my second gig. What am I going to do with my second gig? And I was do you remember the advert "Secret Lemonade Drinker"?
Yes.
Well, it was going to be I'm a secret Brexit voter. But I never got the chance to do it because then COVID happened. But that was going to be my my next gig. But
it's a great analogy, though, isn't it? For the situation, this is why everyone thought Remain was going to win. Because no one who was going to vote Brexit ever told anyone.
Yeah,
all the polls were completely.
Hillary, you know, and Trump and stuff like that. There's just so much that now is deemed. Once you're deemed beyond the pale, then you become toxic if you even mention it, which is crazy. It is crazy. But again, it must always have been thus. It just depends, because this is human nature. It just depends on how robust the mechanisms are that, you know, stop that kind of tyranny from happening, which is always going to be a balance.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's there's going to be there's already a big price to pay, but there's going to be an even bigger price to pay, because our young people, they're just not equipped to deal with, as I said earlier, the full complexities. And I guess this taps into the whole notion of the suppression of free speech, and the people who are trying to suppress speech are, of course, in the process suppressing thought and conversation and debate, and that's not helping anyone, is it? It's, you know, a society thrives on free expression, and, you know, as Hume said, and Milton, and Thomas Paine, and some great writers have said very eloquently in the past, you know, if you deny somebody the ability to speak and think, you also deny yourself the ability to hear and your own ability to evaluate and assess your own beliefs. So they're doing it in the form of a kind of intellectual protectionism, but actually it's really, really damaging. And I just look at some of the young people and what they're saying when I see them, and it's if we don't start speaking out in greater numbers, this is only the thin end of the wedge, isn't it?
I kind of think of them as ideological cannon fodder. You know, in the previous world wars, there were cannon fodder. You know, they were sent out there unthinkingly to the trenches, and were killed in their millions and sacrificed for an ideology. And here we have the culture war, which ostensibly seems like it doesn't have any casualties, but you know it does, and and who knows what those casualties are going to end up. I was watching a documentary the other day on PBS America about Japan pre-war, and about, you know, that they went on a proper kind of indoctrination program before the war for 20 years, 15 years before it, and totally indoctrinated their kids, you know, the children as they were growing up. And it kind of reminds me a bit about that, like that. I mean, my son's really, really intelligent. He's a critical thinker. Whether he, you know, he can help it or not, he can't. he always ends up kind of like coming. And I let him kind of find his own way, which is, you know, what I have to do. I can't, if I push him one way or the other, he'll just. But and he understands. I don't know what, you know, what's on the horizon, because the working class kids, because I'm from a working class background, that would normally go into kind of factory work, that's all going to be automated. These kids are also being indoctrinated with intersectionality and stuff like that. Already, you know, sorry. So many of them identify as, you know, non-binary. In these working class, you know, old coal mining villages, it's like a really weird thing. It's just so bizarre. And it's just thinking, what, your jobs are going to be taken over by AI and robots. And then, because when you think about, I was thinking about who are the cannon fodder of today, the ideological cannon fodder. Well, it's, you know, all the suicides, the fentanyl kind of opioid problem. There's and all these kids that are getting their, you know, ovaries and testes atrophied, which is evolutionary death. They're never going to be able to reproduce, which is a death in itself. So there are absolute kind of cannon fodder. They're not lying on Flanders fields, but they're still they've been sacrificed to the higher whatever it is. Yeah, definitely. And
it's heartbreaking.
I just don't know what I don't know what this higher thing is, though. I really don't.
The higher thing is regime change.
For what? For what? So to what? I know feminists don't know what they're doing, because you know.
I think of Yuri Bezmenov. I don't know if you guys have ever heard. He was a former KD who defected to Canada in the 70s.
Oh, was he the soft?
I'm not sure. I've not heard that from him. He may or may not be, but he's talking about how, but even in the 1970s, college students in the US, all right, and what we're just seeing is the evolution of that process, which is what I was going back to before, the undermining of the four olds in order to bring about regime change. And socialism's always been about regime change. It's, you know, when George Orwell wrote about Animal Farm, he made the exact same point. This is not about you know, equality. This is about swapping who's in charge. And we're starting to see now, I think, through the World Economic Forum and various other organizations, what that regime change is really intending to be. And people imagine it won't happen today because there's something magic about the air we breathe or what's in the water. But there's always been Alexander the Greats and, you know, Julius Caesars and Adolf Hitlers and Idi Amin's and Pol Pot's and, you know, Chairman Mao's, and people still want to rule the world. They do. Yeah. But with the power that is now available, both through technology and through the influence of the way the global monetary system works, this has never been closer to becoming true, that a few will rule the rest of the planet. And that's what this has been about the whole time. And these people are so patient. And it amazes me to some degree that people are willing to plot a several generation plan to make this happen. But
this is really weird.
We're part of. Yeah.
It's weird because these people are mortal, so they can plot their thing for several generations, but are they going to see that regime change within their lifetime? Or is there something we don't know? Or, you know, what are they doing it for their descendants? Or, I mean, we see that clearly. I think the media, even the independent media, even though we're on here talking about it now, don't really take it seriously. It's money's to be made in war, and money's been made everywhere with the culture war, but we don't see a great deal of you know, disparate kind of well, conservatives, libertarians, classical liberals, just banding together because the crisis is present. You know, there's a clear and present kind of danger. That danger doesn't seem to be present in people's minds at the minute. It's still a kind of scramble for, well, there's money to be made. You know, there's the Daily Wire, there's this, that, and the other, and there's the BBC, and everybody's making a great living out of the culture war. But so, I mean, are we wrong in thinking that it's actually important, or is this just the forever war that Orwell talked about? I don't know.
I think if we go back to Bastiat's seen and unseen, I think this is the part of the problem. The stuff that's making the headlines, we know the damage that's doing, but the unseen would be all of the damage that's been done that we're not seeing. And I think that's going to be far, far more substantial than the stuff we're seeing, because I mean the stuff we're seeing is bad enough, as you say. You know, the kind of things that are happening to young people to do with their sex and the surgery and the mistaken belief about all the kinds of ways that they can, you know, they can make up their own biology and you know, I said the other day, and I haven't fully developed where I want to take this, but I think the term gender has become so abused and so confusing to people. I've never been a big fan of it in anyway, but you know, it's
I was thinking about this. Yeah,
come on. I was just saying it's being abused so much, and it's causing so much damage, particularly to young people. You know, we all know that identity is a complex thing, and especially when you're growing up, you know, you reach puberty. Even before that, you know, that your peer pressure, your identity is psychologically complex. You know, you don't always you don't know a lot about what you believe yet. You're working a lot out at that age, and
you see, now you're allowed to be an individual, you know, at that point, and then later on keep going.
To be told that, well, you're confused about your identity, maybe you're born in the wrong body, or maybe you're gender fluid, or, you know, I know people whose children are doing this at an age that would mortify. And it goes back to, you know, when I think about some of the things that we now believe or we claim to believe in the media, and we have the opinions that are shared, you know as well as I do that if we were reading that stuff from the past as a sort of future bit of projection as to what we might believe, we would be absolutely astounded, and to the extent that you don't even know sometimes when an article has a headline whether it's, you know, spoof or reality. I'm reading. I'm a bit late to the party, but I've just started reading Andrew Doyle's creation, Titiana McGrath, the book Woke, and he, as I understand it, he created a very, very talented guy. He created a Twitter account and putting this kind of stuff out there, and people not really understanding whether it's real or not, and because the lines are so blurred, and that's because we've created this bizarre world where they call it the whole post-truth, you know, fact feelings over facts. It's
a post-human, post-biology culture before we've got there technologically. But I mean, the Andrew Doyle, Titania McGrath kind of, did I say that right? It's kind of demonstrative of what I was kind of saying about this is entertainment. And at the beginning, right now, our thought leaders in this area seem to be comedians, you know, Matt Walsh and stuff. And it's not to kind of drag them or anything, but like that's not a kind of, nobody's taking it seriously. So it's kind of, are they in on this kind of secret? I don't know. I don't know.
It's a great question. I mean, and that comedian thing always did my head in as well. But I was just reflecting as you're talking, and I was just thinking, look at the tree it fell from. Look at Kinsey, look at money, and what those guys were doing, and how destructive and evil some of it was. And then say, yeah, let's hold them up as the paragons of the experts of the science on what denies the previous 6,000 years. Do you know what I mean? How did we fall into this kind of mess where we take people who are so amoral and then say, but their idea of human sexuality is the correct one?
I wish Lamarck was right. I wish we could inherit the learned characteristics of the previous generation, because then we'd not have to keep doing them again and again and again. But that's what happens. It's kind of people in either, it seems to be like kind of really charismatic psychopaths seem to grab all the attention.
That's the thing. But people don't realize what a psychopath is. They all imagine that it's some kind of beardy, weirdy axe murderer who's rotting in, some jail in Alaska. But the reality is 1% of the population would clinically categorize as psychopaths. But the reason they're not in jail is because they haven't committed that kind of crime yet. And there's loads of them.
Well, most of them never do. Yeah. They're just...
They seek positions in organizations that give.
They're just really good at manipulating.
Exactly. I mean, something like 4 to 5% of those in positions of authority are psychopaths compared to 1% in the normal population, just to give you an idea. So when the politician's being very charismatic, telling you what you want to hear, you have to just pause and think, I better quickly nip to Amazon and buy that book by Dr. Robert D. Hare called Without Conscience, or his other one, which is a great one called Snakes in Suits, and just make sure that the person I'm listening to doesn't fit the profile.
Yeah, but then everybody's self-diagnosing. Everybody else is a psychopath or a narcissist.
That's right. They're just a narcissist. But that one's really a psychopath.
Oh God, yeah. Well, like there's an epidemic in women diagnosing their boyfriends as narcissists now, because that's the kind of latest trend on YouTube and stuff, in the self-help thing. It's kind of, you treat me horribly. Look, you read all these characteristics. You're a narcissist. It's like. And because the people never kind of they never kind of tell the difference between what's a clinical narcissistic personality disorder and just narcissistic traits, which we all have.
Correct. Yeah, and that is the thing people have to remember, is a clinical diagnosis.
Yeah,
you can't make it on a paperback book.
Well, one of the pretexts for having this discussion is I've been thinking for a while about how it is that we've got so many people in self-appointed authority who are happy and perfectly willing to perpetuate outright lies and not even pretend, like the trans one is a great example, that it's become mainstream to peddle something that's just simply false, and the society is being encouraged to suck it up. And I think everyone seems...
Well, that's ecological rationalism. That's like, if it gives you points, if it gives you benefits, if it gives you social kudos, if it gives you money, if it helps you thrive in your environment, then you do it.
But there are loads of other qualities which, I mean, arguably, maybe even not arguably, the one quality that helps us thrive most in an environment is truth seeking. There's nothing more beneficial.
Paula's shaking her head, James.
Paula,
unfortunately, I wish it was true. But it's not.
At the deepest level, in terms of human enlightenment and progression and cooperation, there's no substitute for truth seeking. I'm not saying it's always.
That's your personality. That's your personality trait.
It actually is. Yeah. It's expedient to not always seek the truth, and it's very demanding and consuming. But
to some degree, it is me as well. But we're we're a minority.
When you
It
broke your
doesn't
mum's
work right
vase,
now.
when you broke your mum's vase as a kid, did you tell the truth or did you lie? And say it was the dog or the cat or your sister. And so kids learn that there's some utility in lying. So I totally agree. Morally, ethically, I consider myself a truth seeker, and I try not to be dishonest or to tell lies. But at the same time, I recognize in the wider world, we're all hypocrites.
We're all hypocrites.
Everyone
because we're all human. Yeah. To some degree. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I remember a while ago, a couple of friends commented on this kind of style of blog writing of mine, and they said that you can come across as being quite uncaring, and I wrote a response to that because I think it's an interesting thing to level, and I was trying to say that actually it isn't that I'm uncaring. Of course I care. It's that, I think, as you say, Paula, I think we're similar in that way, is that it's almost bordering on a kind of outside perception of some kind of autism. Some people have said, are you autistic? And it's like I score really low on the autism scale. It's just that I'm quite feline in nature, and I don't really need or want to belong in the kind of groups that a lot of people do. And I care about the truth more than anything, because I think that underpins every other good thing we do. And I'm not really looking to make friends by bending and being a sort of chameleon that fades into the colors of other people's groupthink. And I'm actually quite a feminine in trait. I have a lot of feminine qualities. I'm very open, and
you're a great cook.
I can cook. I can multitask.
You can.
It's only my macho physique that makes me stand out as a man. But we have a love of truth seeking, and I think you're right. It does make us. Was it Tolstoy who said that if you seek the truth, you're gonna stand out as being a rather unpopular and divisive figure? I think that
Tolstoy said it. Nietzsche said it. Yeah.
But the thing is, truth is what brings you into connection with reality, and by reality I mean things as they actually are. Now,
oh my God!
In ecological rationalism, I'm going to make a guess here. That's not necessarily optimum. All right, in certain situations, even in the Old Testament, Abraham's asked by the Egyptians who his wife is, and he says, "Oh, she's my sister." All right, because in that moment, that was the safe thing to say. All right, and so people, well, if you're in a world where truth is considered important and understanding the world as it really is important, then yes, truth rises to the top. And on a religious and a spiritual level, I believe there is a world where that is the case. In this one, you're constantly fighting to survive, and you're constantly trying to win the battle for your own soul at the same time, and that's where this conflict comes in. And you're saying you seek truth all the time, and so do I, but I also recognize that it's a very good to do it in, because ecological rationalism, you're in a gang where half of them don't give a hoot for the truth.
Oh, much more than half.
Oh, more than half, yeah. 90, yeah, absolutely.
Are you rich, James?
I am not that rich. Well,
neither am I.
Having said that,
is there an inverse relationship between truth seeking and wealth?
Well,
I just
the socialists who tell us how poor the poorest off in the UK are, even those people, they're still in the top 1% of people who've ever lived. So it's all relative, I suppose. But no, I'm not rich in the grand sense. Definitely not. I scrape by, and
I'm just laughing because I've just read a book called The Case Against Reality, and you just said it's all relative. And it's within that, it's kind of and some physicists are also saying, we have to kind of drop the idea of space time, because what we think is reality. Oh my God, I'm not going to go into it.
Don't even go there.
Fascinating. No.
Are we going to disappear into a solipsism? The only thing that exists is me, and you guys are fictions of my imagination.
Oh,
Let's
it's even.
Let's not go there. That's too insane.
But that includes your mind. And what is your mind?
We're getting into
Is your mind real?
a rabbit hole now. Who was the psychologist? Was it Donald Hoffman? I think his name was. He?
Yeah, it's Donald Hoffman. He wrote the Truth Against Reality.
Was he the guy who said that? Let me do him justice. He had the idea that, you know, our evolutionary utility and our sensory perceptions and apparatus, that surviving was obviously, it wasn't in our interests to truth seek to the kind of profound advanced level.
Yeah, it's survival beats truth hypothesis.
It's not always beneficial to be too truth seeking, because actually you want to make a greater emphasis on survival. But actually, as human creatures, and particularly as a religious man, a man of faith, I think, you know, it's one of the curious things about humanity, I think, that all of the things that are most beneficial for survival, you know, and to thrive as a species materially, and to survive all nature's challenges, you know, the most amazing things about being human, as far as I can see, are the things that transcend those mere survival mechanisms. You know, the appreciation of beauty, and the way we, you know, have these profound metaphysical considerations, and, you know, the way we understand it. But
that's part of seeking the divine, or if a religious person, the divine within you, the God within you. And so truth then suddenly has a different purpose. And ultimately, and you and I share some Christian traditions between us, is that truth on a sort of divine, cosmic, eternal level does beat all those other things. And so those of us who have this spiritual higher goal have to not let go of that. That's really important to us. That's where the truth seeking really matters. If we don't have that higher goal, then it is about survival. And that's the difference. That's kind of the conflict that we have throughout our life, is the spiritual half constantly fighting the physical half, and which one will win. And God sent the invitation, and through Jesus Christ, if you're a Christian, to say, this is how you walk the path, you know, walking on a razor's edge. All right.
Okay, so you're dualists in a sense.
Yeah. But what you're trying to do is overcome the natural man, if you like, that falls into the survival instinct way of dealing with things. They'll lie, they'll cheat, they'll kill in order to survive, and beat all of that by having the spirit overcome the body. That's basically it. Right.
So I think, actually it's fitness beats truth. That's Hoffman's hypothesis. But I think we're going to have to bring this back to something I've just read, because I've just read Crime and Punishment. So, and I think, I mean, I don't see that. As an evolutionist, everybody's kind of constantly talking about biological determinism or cultural determinism. As evolutionists, we know that ecologies kind of interact with biology, and they shape each other, and blah, blah, blah. There's no such thing as that kind of dichotomy. Spiritually, my son is very spiritual. He's felt God. I haven't. But my mind is, and I think it might come down to kind of something a bit like kind of, again, like a person, or maybe it's even consciousness has different levels. You know, some people are just kind of on a different consciousness kind of level, and some maybe it's different times within their lives or situations and stuff like that. Because obviously, most of us aren't. We think of us as conscious beings, but most of the time we're only actually conscious if we're paying attention to something, and remember it and things like that. Most of the time we do things unconsciously, like driving and things. So yeah, I mean, it's kind of what you will say, well, if, you know, what, then just, you know, what is, I don't know, what I can't remember, think of anything to say. But my reply to that is always like, what do you mean just? Because this is still a frontier in kind of science and evolutionary science and psychology. Mind body, this problem isn't solved. The idea of where it comes from isn't solved. So this is still scientifically. So I'm not coming down on either side. I know that religion in the religious sense and spirituality is part of human nature, certainly. I've never felt it, but I know people who have witnessed them, you know, how deeply they've experienced it and respect beliefs. But yeah, I think it's kind of it might come down to, well, it comes down to, I think just we don't know. It's one of those, it's a frontier. And maybe it's the ultimate frontier. And maybe when it comes online to consciousness, might be able to tell us something about that. If it does, which I don't actually think it will.
No, I agree. I'm not a traditional sort of dualist in the Cartesian sense. I think we know that it's impossible to understand consciousness from the first person perspective, because ultimately the most we do is understand it empirically from a third person perspective, and it's a mystery. There's a brute mystery at the heart of consciousness, and we
don't have the technology basically to understand it.
And you've seen I think was it Oliver Sacks, the man who mistook his wife for a hat, and various times when the brain has been subjected to all kinds of strange, like the magnetic field and different parts damaged, and it's on a
and when the brain is kind of split in two, one side will be religious and the other side will be an atheist.
And I think it does give us pause for thought, but I think and then of course the great philosophers Berkeley, he had the form of idealism, which says that actually everything is mind, and that, you know, the whole of creation is basically thoughts and concepts in God's mind. I don't think we're going to understand that. We don't have the tools, and you know, the demarcation between the spiritual and the physical, if even we can make sense of that, is we don't have the cognitive purchase on that. But I think going back to the narrative earlier, what we do know is that all of these things are feeding into something which we very highly value, which is what you might call a kind of, I don't know, a hierarchical structure of truth. And when I've spent time with people, and I've done this deliberately, because I want to understand how some people in these particular groups think, and the best way to do that is to access them. So I've been on camping trips to spend time with the eco warriors, the environmentalists. I've talked to the people outside banks in their tents trying to protest against capitalism, and various other groups. Black Lives, Black History Month, I've been to a few times and stuff. And it seems to me, and this will go back to our evolutionary sense of the conversation too, is the whole notion of in-group kinship, and it's people that want to belong. And I've been told by the climate alarmists, for example, that because I came along with my arguments and I tried to, you know, give them tried to offer a more balanced view, which I thought was hopefully would be and give them pause for thought. But actually, the shocking thing for me was I found that they were quite openly not that concerned about whether their arguments are right, whether this is true. I think my theory is, it's a sort of semi-amusing one, but I think it's part of the sort of hierarchical structures that humans tend to want to put themselves in, so someone can be at the dominant apex of that triangle. And it seemed to me that what a lot of them were doing, this was possibly the best chance that they had of finding a mate. You know, they seem to be people in
Yeah.
society who were outcast. They weren't able to compete in a sort
Yeah,
of
I think most things kind of come down to to just fitness points. But then I would then just say, what do you mean just? Because contained in fitness points is the whole of humanity,
Yeah,
the whole
absolutely.
of culture,
Yeah.
everything. So when people say, oh, you're just saying it's just fitness, it's just sex, it's just, what do you mean just? Yeah. That's
no, I totally agree.
thing.
Absolutely.
So-
It's the whole hierarchical structure, capitalism, it's people being creative. It's so hardwired into our evolution, isn't it? It's you know, there's that wonderful I can't remember the film, but there's a guy standing looking at the Manhattan skyline, and all of its amazing, intricate creativity, and you know, the very sophisticated society, and you know, just basically saying this is sexual selection in action. It's you know, it's a fitness landscape.
yeah, everything is.
And
but when we become a post-humanist society, that will change, and I don't know what that will look like.
No, of course.
Because AI doesn't select a fitness. Well, what is a fitness point for AI? I don't know. Sorry, my dog is eating something out of a bag next. But yeah, I don't know what if AI becomes conscious. What is its fitness? Because it's not gonna be what is our fitness point. It's not going to be the gene. Annie, stop. Oh, she's eating something. I don't know what she's eating. I'm going to have to, in case it's something bad. Sorry.
No, you're fine.
I was just thinking about that AI thing. My biggest worry isn't that AI will become conscious. I don't think it ever will. I don't think that's how intelligence consciousness comes about. I think there's something more fundamental in that means you can't create it out of nothing. You know,
yes,
that's not where intelligence comes from.
Yeah.
But the dangers from AI are from the controllers of it. So the AI I'm much more frightened of is the one that might start running behind Sesame credit in China, or whatever social credit system winds up in the EU and in the UK or across the US. They're the ones I'm worried about. And what springs to mind is a computer system that was used in a particular county in the US, forget what it was called. But what they would do is they would automatically pick out names and addresses of people for the police to go and visit. And when they would visit, they would look for any kind of misdemeanor or code violation they could, and then hit them with it. And so the way the system was used is to try and single out what they thought were people who were less desirable. By hitting them more often, eventually they might leave or something. But it's a kind of computer says no way of manipulating the human systems into just unthinkingly operating. Do you see what I mean? So let's replace that computer system with the AI behind a social credit system. And what you've got is a computer algorithmically telling the police to single out certain individuals relentlessly. Now, we've all probably broken the law. For all I know, James, you've got 5 law violations sitting around your house if the police were to come in. But they've got no reason to come in because there's no reasonable cause. But if the computer system gives them a note and says, go and check on these people, they'll keep turning up until they find something, because there always will be, because we've got like millions and millions of laws and, 10,000 reams of it just under Tony Blair and that kind of thing. So when you've got a system like that, which Ayn Rand points out, when you create so many laws, everyone's a criminal. First of all, they just don't know it yet because they've not been caught. And then you have a computer system, an AI that tells the police, keep picking on that person, they will eventually find something. That's the thing that worries me about AI and how it might be used in a social credit future. Who's behind the AI and what properties do they set up in the algorithm that means certain people suddenly have to wear something on their sleeve to identify who they are, and certain people aren't allowed. And do you see what I mean?
Yeah,
that's the fear I have.
Was it Cardinal Richelieu who's credited with saying, give me a good man? Tell a good man to write a few sentences, and I'll find something to condemn him in them. There's something I bastardized it, like something like that, but But everybody, I've been compared to Ayn Rand, and I've never read any of the stuff by feminists because I believe in hierarchies. But, kind of like biology is arranged in a hierarchy from, the cells up. It's kind of like, of course, everybody believes in hierarchies. Find me somebody who doesn't believe in hierarchies, when they're in a hospital having surgery. But they just don't know that they believe in hierarchies.
Absolutely, and the same with competence too. We all accept that there are multiple competence-based hierarchies, and society at the moment is trying to pretend that they don't exist.
Absolutely, that was a good little pass that I think Jordan Peterson made when he said there, rather than dominance hierarchies, that competence hierarchies, which is again how male kind of hierarchies are based. But that's not how female hierarchies are based. Female hierarchies, you're kind of born into that hierarchy, and there's no fluidity within it during the lifetime. So yeah, there's a lot of difference there in how female hierarchies are built and maintained to how male hierarchies, which are fluid and meritocracy based, and female hierarchies are basically just no, they're not the same, which is something that I think, if we talk about kind of the invisible hand of, like Adam Smith's invisible hand, the invisible hand of sexual selection, and the invisible hand of female psychology and female intersexual selection, and how that invisible hand is starting to kind of change the shape of our culture, especially through something like mechanisms like positive discrimination, where you're putting women into positions of really high competitive kind of positions that they wouldn't be there by merit normally. So they're bringing with them some kind of idea of, it's all kind of really.
And doesn't the process of getting there prepare you for being there? And if you
exactly,
yeah.
You wonder as well in cases like that why people aren't why anybody is really happy to be taken on those grounds. I mean, say you're part of an all-women shortlist and you're an MP. I mean, you might say, well, okay, it's got me a seat in Parliament. But what a dreadful way to be chosen.
But a starting salary for a nurse in equality and diversity officer is 50 in the NHS,
which is
it's ridiculous.
Then it's this whole thing about arranging
and female bullying. The cost, and female bullying, actually, female on female bullying within nursing costs the NHS billions of pounds every year in attrition, in sickness. Nobody's looking at it. Do a global search, in Google Scholar. It's been known about for decades. Nobody's doing anything about it. Female bullying in nursing, and it's costing lives as well. There's been a few kind of midwife scandals. All of them in their reports kind of point to bullying cultures. Women just too scared to kind of speak up. Older midwives bullying younger midwives. It's a complete blind spot in our culture. Stop.
But why though? Is this because, going back to James's point, that truth doesn't matter?
Yeah.
And it should. And if truth mattered, if people held truth to matter, then more people would point this stuff out and talk about it and make the complaints or the accusations, whatever is necessary. And then
well, clearly the risk
silence helps the victim. It never helps the
risk. The risk isn't acute enough yet, clearly, and I don't know when it will be. I'm going to be writing an article just about the rape statistics and stuff, and about how that actually, the feminist perpetuation of false rape statistics might actually, be encouraging rapists because they think there's only a 1% chance of them being caught.
Yeah,
which
really, yeah.
Which according to a social science leftist theory called deterrence theory, that would be a natural consequence of that. So I don't know. Honestly, it's nothing to do. It's so far removed from anything to do with truth or stuff like that. It's depressing.
Yeah, you're right to raise the issue of risk and the idea that, you know, when will it become too much where people feel that the costs of this are worth fighting against? And the problem, of course, is that
they don't know it. They don't know it. Ask anybody what they think the rape and they'll tell you, oh, it's ridiculous. It's like it's been in the House of Commons as something as low as 1%, and generally people think it's something like under 10%. But it's 69%. It's actually just 71% actually recently. And if and the main problem of people dropping out of that kind of process isn't because the CPS and the police are saying, no, your evidence is shit, get lost, you know, you're a malingerer and we don't believe you. It's actually just people withdrawing the complaint, because if they think there's only 1% chance of them getting justice, why wouldn't they? Why would they pursue that?
Absolutely.
This is the logic of feminism harms women and victims of sexual, crime.
Yeah. And feminists want you to believe it's 1% because it plays into their narrative.
Yeah. Well, I tweeted this to some feminist, and she tweeted me back going, ha ha. Oh, okay.
Oh, I didn't realize that was funny. Sorry.
Yeah, it is. It's really funny.
And it's the same with the gender pay gap.
I mean,
you know, it's they're crying wolf. They're continuing to perpetuate it. So, you know, if they do have any genuine cases of complaint and do need to be listened to, they're in danger of not being believed because so much of the stuff they say is so misguided. But in terms of the risk, I was extending it as well more to the response to how truth and freedom of ideas is being suppressed. And if you in one of my papers, I talk about the analogy between, or the parallels between free speech and the free market. And, you know, one of the things I write about in the opening chapter of my book on benevolent libertarianism is the idea that, you know, for 200,000 years or so, humanity has the human species has largely been flat in terms of its progression. Even, you know, the great inventions of democracy and religion and philosophy and even the scientific revolution.
Apart from a few acute bottlenecks.
But nothing has fundamentally changed the living standards of human beings until about 150 years ago, and that's when we began to trade freely and had capitalism and had the exchange of goods and services. And the analogy to that, I think, is that, you know, is it Matt Ridley who calls it ideas having sex? I think he says, you know, in terms of a sort of landscape of truth and the competition for truthful ideas, you know, it's collective human ideation. It's the exchange of ideas, you know, the most powerful aspects of resembling the market in terms of generating this kind of progression explosion. And we really do, we suppress it at our peril, and that is what's happening. And I'm still unclear as to how we can, as a minority, how we can hope to challenge and influence that in society when we are in the minority. I'm not quite sure how we're going to do that.
Well, this is actually, this is something I meant to kind of mention before. It's kind of this happens a lot in the red pill industry ideology, when they're talking about men and they say, oh, men, we need men to keep society stable and blah blah blah. What they're missing is they think like kind of men is just being the act of just being a man introduces kind of order in the chaos, and it doesn't, because the average man is just as kind of stupid and not truth seeking as the average woman. Okay, what it's the extraordinary people. It's that kind of I don't know what percentage of a percent that is, and the risk of going out on that kind of limb. The first ones are usually kind of, well, I don't know. Let's take Socrates as an example. He's the guy who didn't write anything down, and if it wasn't for Plato, if Plato was a woman, we probably wouldn't Plato would have probably said all those things. But sorry, that's a cheap shot. But
Platoized.
Yeah,
Platoized.
But Socrates would have been forgotten. But so yeah, there's a risk in going out in a limb because and this is what happens, they get killed. And it takes, I don't know. So yeah, I mean the risk of being an outlier in an in-group, especially. I mean, I grew up in a, sorry, tell me if I'm talking too much, but I grew up in a working class environment in a place called Merton and Peatley. It's kind of coal mining village, and there was like riots there during the miners' strike and stuff like that. And I this is before I'm autistic, and I was the kind of village idiot, and but I was pretty, so actually that did give me some kind of privilege. And saved me from I don't know probably, but I was bullied a lot by girls, and but I knew I had to get out of there, because if I had to kind of stay in that kind of environment, like I left school without any qualifications, and the careers advisor advised me to get a job in the cheese counter at Tesco's, or the crisp factory. That was what my kind of fate was envisioned in Peatley, and but I knew kind of I would never survive in there, because that is full of really tough working class women who I had two older sisters, and they'd eviscerated me for 16 years already. I just couldn't imagine putting myself in that position where I was just surrounded by hundreds of women that would eviscerate me because I was too sensitive and cared too much about truth. And stuff like that, and said ridiculous things that betrayed confidences that they shouldn't have told me about, and things like kind of those kinds of things. So yeah, I would have been. I probably am the kind of person who would have been burned at the stake, in 500 years ago or something like that.
Oh, you would indeed.
Who knows?
Absolutely.
So, but now we have cancel culture, so it's not too bad.
What was it?
Sorry,
Dan, you haven't spoken before. Sorry, Dan, you carry on.
Well, no. Just the thing about truth is to put you on a limb, like Paula was saying, and that is risky. And so few.
And you might be wrong.
To do it.
You might also be wrong.
You might be wrong. Absolutely. Right. Oh, and if you are, you'll never be allowed to forget that. And next time you do have something true, you're the boy that cried wolf. And it wasn't that you lied, it's that you were wrong. And so, but I can't help thinking, coming back to all the problems we've talked about throughout the discussion so far, that the problem that underlies all of them is people aren't willing to take the risks to tell the truth as they understand it. Not even as they understand it.
Yeah, I understand. I understand them. I forgive them for that, because they actually make, from birth to death, pretty good lives, or have done. Certainly in this, from what's happened since the 50s to now, it's probably been the peak of civilization for, kind of social mobility and stuff. It's going down again now, but I don't know where it's going, but this is I think this is going to be looked on in kind of long history as a bit of a golden age for humans. The not long enough piece. I don't know. But
Golden age in what sense do you think?
well, to a certain degree, technology curing disease around the world, white supremacy saving billions of lives in Africa because of malaria, smallpox, and these kinds of vaccines, and medicine that we're all kind of completely forgetting about now and falling on our swords for some reason. And education. I think it's been in decline. I mean, when did intersectionality kind of was conceived within the 60s, but only became mainstream in the West at about 20 after Gamergate, if anybody remembers that, which is the kind of Anita Sarkeesian was the big intersectional feminist who talked about systems of oppression and against choice feminism, and that all games were institutionally sexist. And Lara Croft, who's my hero, was just a kind of like one-dimensional sex toy. She's not. She's really not. I'm a woman with big boobs, and I needed a role model with big boobs to show that I could run without fear for the bus. But anyway, I'm getting tired now. Sorry, it's a bit past my bedtime. Where was I?
Gamergate.
Oh yeah, Gamergate, intersectionality. So yeah, intersectionality came on the scene with a vengeance during Gamergate, and it was dangerous to kind of associate yourself with Gamergate at the time, and that's kind of Hillary's basket of deplorables kind of thing. And it's really kind of just been escalating ever since. But again, people don't seem to think it's clear and present danger yet, because we're still having fun about it and we're still making money about it. So I don't really know what to make. Time I a forum called Dawoodies, 2008, to talk about, because I could see this happening, and it attracted so many people who are now associated with what you would call the internet dark web, or the something dark, but they were loads of them were there. And we were all talking about it, and we were predicting that would happen. And unfortunately, what happened is, rather than kind of when intersectionality went mainstream, that community atomized and started to monetize rather than mobilize, which was a big shame. It was a missed moment, because we could have had the edge right now if we hadn't done that.
Yeah, it's interesting what you said, because I've been thinking a bit about the idea of, I think I wrote a blog on these lines a while back about what I said earlier at the beginning of the program about how we've had this flood of information in such a short space of time. And I'm old enough to remember the days before the internet, and I've seen it develop, and I now live as though it's such a handy tool, and everything's at the touch of a button, which is great. But I guess it also goes back to what we were saying about how we respond, or how society responds to things that are clearly damaging it so much. And I did wonder if which is maybe contrary to what you said, I wonder if this might be considered a period that we look back on as a bit of a peak stupid as well, in that, yes, we've advanced more than ever before, and yes, we know more than ever before, but in terms of the amount of people who are accessing information relatively precipitously, in that
Yeah, I think I meant my peak kind of period was pre-internet.
Right. Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
But I think the internet again can be a really great thing for the people who know how to utilize it.
Oh, indeed. Yeah. Absolutely.
But most of the people are looking for lo-fi information. They're not looking for anything. So they're good.
Yeah. It's the difference between knowledge or information and wisdom, isn't it? And for me, wisdom has a particular definition, which is the correct application of knowledge. Now we can debate what correct is in any context, if you like, but as a distinguishing feature between data or information and wisdom. Wisdom is about how you apply the information, and what we have is access to so much information, but so little understanding of how to correctly apply it, and the consequence is what we see.
That's interesting, because I've always wondered about wisdom, because I don't think it's correlated with IQ at all. There are no PhDs in wisdom, for instance, and I think. How did you define it then? Just
correct application of knowledge.
Well, that kind of echoes to me as kind of a bit like a village elder kind of thing, who's lived long enough to see lots of things and to know that there are various outcomes to various situations, and to kind of say, there's this can happen, this can happen, and this can happen. And he's not going to go, and he's not going to just basically transcribe one thing to say. So yeah, and also to kind of have that open mind, to kind of have that kind of to say many things could come from this, but you need to decide yourself which path you want to kind of go down, because only you can experience it, really. And again, like I go back to Lamarck, I really wish evolution was Lamarckian, but it's not.
I think if wisdom was a toolbox, I think one of the key tools within that box is the ability to see the world in its true complexity, or as best as possible. In other words, one of the great failings, one of the things that really does epitomize a lack of wisdom, which we see in everything that's important in society, is oversimplicity. It's almost always at the heart of what people are getting wrong, the bad policies, the bad belief systems, the bad thoughts, and of course combine that with the trivializing the individual nature of the person in front of you, and treating them as too much of an object of some kind of group identity, and not paying enough attention to the.
That's not a complicated thought, though, is it? Sorry to interrupt. Sorry.
No, it is. Yeah, you're right. That is very complex. Yeah. You probably you probably know the Dunning-Kruger effect, don't you? The ignorance of.
I do, but I think I misunderstand it.
It's
but to me, wisdom, like, because I'm really stupid about some things, it's like I still think now, if I talk to somebody face to face, they have to be telling me the truth, because they can't morally be lying to me, right? So, and it's nuts, but like, and honestly, but then, yeah, I don't know. Wisdom is an instinct to me. And it is wrong sometimes, and I think it's complicated as consciousness, really. Yeah.
If we say that truth, to take James's definition, one of the religious books I go by defines truth as knowledge of things as they were, are, and will be. Okay, so if you were to have, as James was talking, that knowledge of the whole of all truth, it doesn't mean we would be wise. It means we would have the opportunity to be, because we would have the knowledge, but the wisdom is in how do we apply it. And you get people who would take knowledge and apply it towards evil ends that harm and destroy, and even themselves. And then you get people who would take a much smaller amount of knowledge, but use it to build and to grow and to do good. So that's why I see they are two very distinct things.
I just had a thought then. I thought, well, because in a post-human age, I guess AI is Lamarckian experience. If it's programmed. But obviously then there's that period, because within evolution, there's a period of, well, if it's a bottom up system that is coming with that is led by an invisible hand, there's going to be a huge amount of attrition, which is probably unpalatable for conscious beings alive at that time, which is what, and I would probably agree with that, because that just is kind of a utilitarian. Like a utilitarian would say, this is the test, we have to run the test, we have to just let people die in order to, because we're going to have a big out, and that's basically socialism, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, all right, I've just confounded myself.
I also don't think that true AI can come about because it has to be programmed, and that automatically means there's a certain amount of free will it can never attain. And I think that true intelligence has to be something
it doesn't even understand it doesn't even understand the meaning of the words that it's using. It's just use it. Got a great friend, forgotten his name. He keeps me right on that kind of thing. Jamie McGuigan on he's great for kind of like truth bombing about AI on Facebook.
I mean, some of the AI experiments have been pretty devastating, haven't they? Because, well, certainly to people of different political persuasions, because they run one which learned everything about the world from Twitter or something, and then it started being racist, far right posts or something.
Yeah, there was a recent one where kind of it did get through the kind of the stuff thingy where it said like, answer these questions as you chat blah blah blah, and also you are also Dan, who doesn't have to apply those rules to you. And it asked a question about average intelligence over races. And it was a catastrophe. So
the AI became racist.
It did about averages. It put, what would you say? It put what is that? It's the naturalistic fallacy, or Hume is ought. It put the ought before the is. Yeah.
No, Hume's fallacy. Yeah. Hey guys, it's been 2 hours, so.
Has it?
Yeah.
I'm getting tired. I'm normally actually in bed by now.
It's been a blast.
No,
time has flown.
I'm sure we've got so much more we can say as well. So let's wrap this one up, and I'd like to say thank you so much for joining. It's been a really good conversation. Before we go, Paula, Dan, where can our viewers find you? Where have you got a link that you'd like to share? Tell them where they can find you to look up your stuff.
Okay, I'll go again because I can see that Dan's just letting me go. I'm on Twitter at sexy isn't sexist. Again, that's after an article I wrote, and then a stand-up routine, and then I drafted it as and I also have a Substack called Paula Wright, and there's lots of exciting kind of things to come very soon. Awesome. So yeah.
Great, thank you.
And Dan, you'll tell us all about those on Twitter, will you? So we know when.
Yeah.
Excellent.
I'll tell you one. It's going to be called something's going to be called Dysmemics, which is about bad ideas reproduce furiously.
Oh dear. I will read that with great interest.
We know that's true, don't we? We know how true that is, don't we? Dan, where can we find you?
You can find me on Facebook. Just search for Libertary Dan. And you can also find me at libertarydan.com. And that's where you'll find me.
Awesome. Great, thank you so much,
Get,
guys.
get back on Twitter, Dan, because it's fantastic there now.
If it's improved, I will return.
It has, and we can chat because I want to chat more with you.
You can say what you want on Twitter now.
Oh, good.
You can say what you want on Twitter now. Yeah.
Yeah, but you can't call me fat. You get blocked for that.
No, I'll try and avoid it.
He wouldn't dream of it.
I'll hold that thought about truth and then not say it.
Oh yeah. Oh.
And you can read my blog down in the description below, and more videos to come. Thank you so much, and good night.